Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game that I played a couple hours ago, where what ended up happening is that I went all in on something that's really stupid, and I should probably end my chess.com account. Either way, we start the game. I start off the game with d4, and my opponent goes e6, which is a decent line. Obviously, what he wants to do is play into the French defense. After e4, he wants to play d5 and get from a d4 position into a position that he's a little more comfortable with in the French. But the thing is, I don't like my opponents having comfort, and I like the London, so I play bishop f4, even though I know it's not the best move. And my opponent here goes with the move f5. And I'm already like, oh man, he kind of tricked me. He already tricked me into kind of playing a Dutch, and I hate the Dutch. Like, what I normally play against the Dutch is some like really wacky sidelines, but yeah, this is already like a position that I don't like. I dislike the Dutch like with a passion with white, so I always try to not go into it. And now I'm in one, and I'm already feeling kind of the heat, even though it's only move 2. I here just keep calm and play e3. Knight f6, I simply go c4 because I thought it's pretty natural. Take some space in the center, get rid of that square. Knight c3 is on the way. It seems like a good move. And my opponent goes with this very interesting move, bishop to d6. And without the eval bar, it's a little bit hard to see why this move is a mistake. Because bishop d6 to me looked very interesting. Sorry. Of course, the natural move here is to play bishop g3, which is what I played in the game after some thought. 20 seconds of thought, a lot of thought. But what I can do here is really interesting. Obviously, I was calculating bishop b6, which is the best line. But I thought after cb6, I didn't really know how to evaluate the position. I thought that my opponent has a lot of pawns in the center. My opponent's going to play this at some point, like that's his idea. Maybe I go knight c3, stop that for a move. Maybe he goes b6. I thought that this position was just like kind of interesting, and I thought that if I was gonna play like something like knight b5, I don't know, like my opponent probably has something. Computer's already setting give up the pawn, but if we're not going crazy, I mean like even queen e7. Well, okay, no, queen e7 doesn't work. I guess my opponent loses a pawn in that line, so maybe then not that move, maybe a6 first. But I guess then white has d5. Okay, I didn't really realize this, but I guess these pawns are really bad against the light squared bishop. But I just thought my opponent was eventually going to play b6 and develop light squared bishop over here anyway. So I thought, you know what? Why am I doing this? It just felt like he's gonna get more play in the center, but actually I'm the one who's getting more play in the center, and those pawns are weak. Because after this knight c3, the idea of mine is to play d5, right? And if my opponent takes, then he's got this awful tripled isolated pawn. Let's just say my opponent plays something random. Castles is probably pretty accurate. And d5, right? If my opponent takes, this is obviously terrible. Tripled isolated pawns in the center, and the bishop is never getting out. That would be awful. And if my opponent pushes, which makes a little more sense, it's actually worse for black because he still has the doubled isolated pawns, and now actually this bishop is never getting out, never ever getting out, because there's just no way to break my nice little central clamp, which is pretty instructive. So I should have done that, but instead bishop g3. Idea is if he takes, I take back with the h pawn, open up my rook, very normal stuff. Castles, and I simply play the move knight to c3. My opponent goes b6, which makes it a lot of sense to me, simply trying to go for something like that. And I could have probably already played a move like knight b5 here. Actually, no, not in this position because he has bishop b5 check. But let's say like after knight f3, which I ended up playing in the game, bishop b7, and maybe I could have played like something like h3. I mean a3 at some point. Then knight b5 becomes a thing. Knight b5 becomes a thing, and if my opponent does something random, I don't know, h5, then knight b5 I think becomes pretty powerful here, targeting the bishop, targeting the pawn, and forcing the bishop to have to trade here, and then I get my rook open, which is exactly what I want in the position, which ends up happening a little later, but all right now. Anyway, knight f3, bishop b7. I play bishop d3, which I thought was pretty natural. I was deciding between bishop d3 and bishop e2. Ended up thinking bishop d3 made a little more sense, so I can bring my queen over here in some lines. So bishop d3, My opponent goes a5, and now I realize that knight b5 I thought was pretty strong. So I ended up playing knight b5, and I'm basically just saying, okay, my opponent is going to take on g3, and then life is good. And I thought that if my opponent gives me this check on b4, I don't know, I can probably play anything. I was thinking about sacking this pawn, because the g file seems really, really good for me, and I'm right. I was also thinking that maybe even like king e2 or king f1 could be interesting here, and life is good. Obviously, I don't want to do this. Going backwards would be stupid. But maybe even like king f1, and actually white is better. But knight b5, my opponent decides to trade. I take back with the h-pawn. I thought, okay, I've gotten everything that I want. My h-file is open. My knight might be coming over here. There's pressure on the queen side, so the queen can't get out of there. It's not like you're ever going to play this move because you block in your light squared bishop, and my knights get this square in some positions. And I'm like, you know what? I think white is better. I think white is better. And I chose the rest of the game to go for an attack. My opponent here plays the move knight e4. Makes sense. Trying to block everything. My knight went off to b5, so now he has the e4 square. I think for a little. And I had a couple things. I thought about queen e2, queen c2. I thought about king e2 for like a split second, which is a little bit interesting, but I decided, why am I blocking my queen? I think at the end of the day, there's two approaches. The attacking approach is queen e2, and the defensive, more positional approach is queen c2, because queen e2 controls this file, and queen c2 is trying to get the knight back in some lines to trade off for this guy and put pressure towards center. I didn't choose either of them, and I chose to be instead really aggressive, but I kind of missed what my opponent was doing. I go knight e5, which makes sense on the surface, trying to get in the position. But for some reason, the move I calculated just didn't make much sense. I calculated the move c6 for some reason. And I'm like, obviously I'm better there because my knight has like this square, and I'm better. For some reason, I didn't calculate the very, very natural move d6. And here, white is still equal, but only if white does this, bishop e4, and then knight, and now queen h5, and then we play h6, and the game goes on. But here, I just completely malfunctioned, and I just went for a really stupid attack. I thought, okay, after that move, I'm gonna play queen h5. And then if you take my knight, I'm going to like mate you, and life is good, and I don't think you can do that. But I completely missed the really, really obvious move, knight f6. And I'm just, oh my god, that's really strong, because you defend the pawn, attack the queen, and now I'm losing a knight. Oh no, that's not good. That's not good at all. And I would be losing here, except for my opponent to also fall for my bluff and do his own type of thing instead. Instead, going for this line with d takes e5, which is pretty tough. And this is kind of the beginning of the end for my opponent. I go queen takes h7 with check. My opponent goes to king f7. And white is only slightly better here due to this very, very interesting line. White is slightly better because of takes, bishop takes. Well, fe is also a line, but you don't want to... Obviously, you don't want these triple isolated pawns. Already, white is doing really well there. So bishop e4, you play queen h5. g6 wouldn't really work because you're allowing the queen to get in. As you can see, everything is dead there. Instead of that, my opponent would probably play the move king to e7, I thought. And now, actually, I have the move long castles. And this is why white is better. Because you're opening up here with this attack on the queen. All your pieces are in the game, and black still has two pieces that aren't moving, and one piece that isn't really that active. Really, this is the only active piece. So that would be why white is better there. But I didn't really realize. The best move here is king g8, and then computer wants me to play either long castles or the move f3. Both pretty natural moves. The idea of f3 is to play g4, and the idea of long castles, again, to open up against the queen. Very, very interesting stuff. But that didn't happen. Here, I kind of panicked because I kind of realized, oh no, I don't think I'm doing too good. I didn't see queen h5. I didn't see bishop takes e4. And I instead went for a different line because I thought, okay, I'm down a piece, but I have compensation against the king. It's not over just yet. It's not over just yet. We still have play. So I played g4, which I thought was really interesting. The idea is, obviously, can't take because the queen opens up against knight. It's a free piece. Bishop, the queen is defending, which would be pretty useful. But my opponent here has a simple resource, knight back to f6, hitting my queen, hitting this square so my queen can go to h5, and I think white is probably worse here. I go queen h4 after some thought. I'm trying to say, okay, if you take this pawn, I might still be okay because I have play over here. Like d takes e5, my opponent can take on d3, I can take on f6, my opponent can take on f6 again, and I don't know, maybe even like rook d1, and like we can get in on the 7th rank, and it's a little bit scary. It's a little bit tough for black to play. Instead of that, my opponent doesn't play that, and instead plays this very, very logical move, and I'm starting to realize that my position is a lot worse. My opponent plays the move e4, which is really, really aggressive, and here I realize, oh no, I am probably losing this game, simply because I don't have enough firepower to do anything. I have to go play bishop e2, so then he can't take the pawn, because then I'm going to win a pawn, and with a pawn, white has chances again. Without a pawn, white probably doesn't. But my opponent is still completely winning if they take it. My opponent can take it. And, well, taking it might look good on the surface. It's not actually that good. Here the computer gives long castles and play this position, but obviously, like, even move like c6, and white is doing pretty poorly here because all the pieces go back. Now I don't have any more compensation. But my opponent freaks out and instead goes with the move knight to c6. And here we go. And white is back in the game. Really, really intense stuff. I find the only move g5. Coming at him with the attack on the knight. The idea is to play g6 and lure the king out and checkmate him. If the king goes back, I'm going to have some mating ideas. I thought the knight had to like stick around, had to like do some weird stuff. Actually, the computer already gives that you lose the pawn here, which is a little crazy. Like bishop g4, fg4, like g6, I think. Yeah, g6 maybe. No. Just recaptures, and this is a drawn position already, which is a little bit insane. But my opponent doesn't do that. He doesn't find the right way, and he's already much, much worse. He makes a second blunder in a row. He goes knight to e8, which is the worst move he could have played, because now he doesn't have the e8 square for his king, and he's losing. He has to go knight d7 if he wants to go back, because then after g6, my opponent can go to e8. Very, very important square. Here, I would have to play something like, I was thinking about bishop h5, but I guess he gets the e7 square? Yeah, and if I go here, then he brings the knight back. Okay. The one do I have to play? I have to go long castles again. It's all about long castles, and I gotta go with this move in the future. Very interesting. But g5, my opponent goes knight e8, and there's an M on the evaluation. There's nothing my opponent can do. I go g6. My opponent is forced to take it. My opponent doesn't have any of these squares with the king. If my opponent goes to g8, this is a simple checkmate in one. So my opponent has to take, and I find the only move again, move bishop to h5 check, and my opponent simply resigns the game because there's nothing he can do. For example, you might ask, wait, really? Is there really nothing you can do? Because, okay, obviously after king h7, we have bishop f7 check, queen takes, and this would be a checkmate here. But let's say my opponent goes to h6 and has a little bit of a brain, and this is a little bit of a tougher mate, but I'm still winning. I can't really just take everything. Like, I can't just take the knight because, like, this position isn't that winning. Like, I probably have to go, like, g3. No, I go check, king f6, and then I, like, I don't know, take the knight, take. And I mean, this position isn't that winning. I'm up a pawn, but it's probably just a draw. The real way to win here, there's a couple of ways, but it's just to go back. A lot of lines just to go back. Queen h2 is the move. The queen h3 is also mate. Queen g3 is what the computer likes the best, along with queen f4, which was the move that I was going to play. Queen f4 here. My opponent has to go g5 to block. If my opponent comes in with the queen, this is a mate in 1. Bishop f7 with a checkmate on the king, because the queen cannot defend since it's pinned, and the rook opens up an attack, and the bishop controls the square. There's nothing my opponent can do. That was what I was going to play, but g5 is what he would do, and then probably bishop takes e8, king g7, and queen h2, and this is a checkmate in attack. A little bit complicated here, but at the end of the day, white already has material. White already has the material advantage, so I should be winning this game, which is nice. Not to mention I'm also 13 stuff like this, and I will be able to get enough compensation to win the game, which is really, really useful. This was a fun game. This was a really fun game. I wasn't prepared to blunder something like as easy as knight f6, like knight f6 and probably game over. That would have been pretty bad, but fortunately for me, my opponent didn't see it, and even though I was completely losing here with sorry, that's not the line. Sorry, what happened? Can we get to the actual move, please? Oh, my mouse was hovering over the wrong move. Sorry. Even though I was like completely losing here, it's still a bit complicated, and luckily for me, my opponent just made a blunder, which allowed me to win the game, which is pretty nice. Pretty nice stuff. Yeah, but that's all I've got for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining. A little bit of a shorter video today. I don't know. I didn't really have that much content to work with, so yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. Good. If you enjoyed, remember to like, subscribe, do all the normal things YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, good evening and good night.